How investment fees hurt your ability to retire. All right. This is a big deal. A big deal, man. So I'm reading my book here. Well, not my book, but Bill Sharp's book right here, Retirement Income Analysis. Bill Sharp, the Sharp ratio. Been doing this for a long, long time, Bill Sharp. And he won a Nobel Prize like 1990 or something like that. 730 pages of stuff. It's great, man. Is it the best book I've ever read? No, it's a good book. Lots of stuff that you could follow up on, dive a little bit deeper into. And one of the articles he cites was this one by John Bogle. We all love John Bogle, The Arithmetic of All-In Investment Expenses. So what Bogle and both Bill Sharp and Bogle says, you have to define what a market is, what a stock market is, all right? And a stock market is just all the individual players in the market. And if you own stocks, you are a player in the market. That's it. So we take all the returns of the individual players. In this case, we're just going to say we have a 6-person contingency in the market. That's it. So we're going to have a market that has 6 players in this. And you take all the returns of the players in the market and you average them. You add them up and then divide by the number of players, and that gives you an average. So in this case, we got a guy who's up 12%. A guy who's up 10, a guy who's up 6, a guy who's up 5, a guy who's up 3, and a guy who's down 3. The market return is simply no more or no less than the average of all the participants. That's all it is, man. So the market return here is 5.5. So you can see half the people did better, half the people did worse, just in a simple scenario. All right, always remember that. The market return is simply the average of all the participants in the market. In fact, Bill Sharp says, it must be the case that before costs, the return on the average actively managed dollar will equal the return on the average passively managed dollar. Right? This is the market return. Regardless of if you're active or passive management, paying high fees or low, because it's before cost, the market return is always 5.5%. Finnegan! Stop! I hope that makes sense. Regardless of what you are as an investor in the market, the market return is 5.5. All right? Now, part 2 of this though. After cost, the return on the average actively managed dollar will be less than return on the active passively managed dollar. It's just basic math, basic arithmetic. Because if we're going to say a 1% fee here, all right, a 1% fee, well, this guy is now 11%, this guy is now 9, this guy is now 5. In fact, this guy is lower. He lost. He's behind the average market. This guy's now -4. This guy's now 2. This guy's now 4. All right? So now we say when you factor in fees, the return on the average actively managed dollar, because he's charged 1%, well, the market was still 5.5, because basically you can buy the market with no fees now. So what is the average active number? Let's take a look. Let me calculate it up real quick. It's actually quite simple. 5.5 minus 1 is 4.5. And you can, will it be like that all the time? I don't know. But you just say 11, 9, that's 25, 29, 31, 27. 27 divided by 6, and that gives you 4.5. So now the average actively managed return is less than the active passively managed return by a factor of the expense ratio. It's just that simple. There's no two ways around this. I mean, you can say, well, yeah, but I'm not going to buy this guy. I'm not going to buy this guy. I'm going to buy that guy. You don't know you're going to buy that guy. You don't know. So if everyone's buying this guy, everyone's going to say, I'm going to buy this guy. So that means this guy doesn't exist? Does that make any sense? And if everybody buys this guy, then the market return will inherently be above 5.5. Because if everyone's now here buying the highest performer, then that is the market. The market will now be 12%, but because you bought the 12% guy, but you're still paying 1% fee, you will still be behind the market. I hope that makes sense. The market is just the conglomeration, the average of all the players in here. There's no other way around that. You factor in fees, the average the average actively managed dollar will always be behind, always and everywhere, the average passively managed dollar. But it gets worse than that. Let me show you why it gets worse. We're going to go to the John Bogle's article. And just to quote Bill Sharp again, because active and passive returns are equal before cost. They are. Before cost, they're equal. All right. And because active managers bear greater costs, they do. Active managers, they charge more than the index. That's just the passive account. They have to. It follows that the average after-cost return from active management must be lower than passive management. It's just that simple. Even if everybody got this 12%, everybody got 12% as a market. Well, the net of fees is only 11%. So the market would be 12, but net of fees is 11. You will always be below the passive account as a market as a whole, always. So if everyone said, no, I'm going to just buy this guy. All right, so the market here is 12, but negative fees, you're getting 11. You'll always be behind. So that's the market because the market is gross of fees. But you can't have gross of fees in an active portfolio because there's fees associated with it. All right. So because active managers bear greater costs, it follows that the after-cost return from active management must be lower than that of passive management. This proof is embarrassingly simple and uses only the most rudimentary notions of simple arithmetic. All right, let's keep going. But this is just the expense ratio. It gets worse. Despite the sharp decline, because this is what Bogle talks about, the all-in cost. It's worse than just the expense ratio. Despite the sharp decline in the commission rates charged by brokers, the costs of portfolio transactions incurred by actively managed funds are substantial, which is not part of the expense ratio. Fund portfolio turnover, based on aggregate industry data, has leaped almost five-fold from the early 1960s. Portfolio turnover has gone from 30% to 140%. So even though the cost per trade has gone down, the number of trades has gone up by 5 times. Thus, that is a fee that is not even included in that right there, the 1% expense ratio or active management or the fee that you're paying. Isn't that crazy? Moreover, where index funds are fully invested at all times, portfolios of actively managed funds typically carry a cash position of about 5%, causing the funds to lose a portion of their long-term equity premium. That's, again, because they're keeping this cash drag. If you look at history, cash has underperformed stocks in the long run. It's just a fact. Let's keep going. The invisible costs are transaction costs that Bogle talks about. He cites a couple of studies right here that says basically one guy, Dr. Haslam, said it costs about 60 basis points. You reduce your returns by 60 basis points because of transaction costs, which isn't part of the expense ratio or the active management fee. It's just not. Part two, some guys out of 2013, they looked at the trading costs incurred by 1,758 domestic equity funds for 10 years. They calculated it cost 1.44% in trading cost. 1.44. Now, Bogle says that might be on the high end, but either way, Bogle thinks that even Morningstar guy says it costs about at least 30 basis points. Yeah, the guy from Morningstar, Don Phillips, said he thinks transaction cost about 30 basis points. Bogle thinks about 60 basis points. Is it crazy? So you're losing the 1% here, plus you're losing the 60 basis points of transaction cost because of the massive amount of trading that gets done. That doesn't come for free. Someone's paying it. It's you. Another cost is a drag of cash. Active funds fairly consistently carry the range of 5% of assets in cash, where index funds are normally fully invested. If we assume an annual long-term equity premium for stocks over cash as little as 6%, there would be an additional 30 basis points drag on active managed funds. So you have 30 basis points for cash, 1% here, 30 basis points for cash, and 60 basis points on transaction costs. Oh, but it gets worse. Check this out. If an investor were to invest 10% of his compensation each year into either an actively managed fund or the total stock market fund from Vanguard, the investor would have accumulated in the index fund $561,000, starting at $30,000 a year, as got John Bogle saying. So you got investors starting at $30,000 a year, put in 10% of his assets in there each and every year. 10%. So 30,000 adjusting with inflation, I think at 3% inflation. So again, we got Joe Schmo starting with $30,000 a year of income. He's putting $3,000 into his portfolio each and every year, adjusted with inflation at 3%. the investor would have accumulated $561,000 in an index fund. 561 versus 366 in an actively managed fund, according to John Bogle. But when all-in costs, which obviously exist and are substantial, whatever the precise amount are considered, the assumed retirement wealth accumulation enhancement provided by low-cost index funds are 65% more than active managed funds. 65% more, according to Bogle. And that doesn't include taxes if you're in a non-brokerage account. If you're in a brokerage account, this is IRA. If you're in a brokerage account, it's even worse. 60% more. So what Bill Sharp says, or what Bogle says, using my primary calculations and assuming a 4% withdrawal rate, the amount difference would be, we could take, this guy right here could take the active guy would take $1,870 a month from a portfolio. The passive guy would take $3,090. So basically, 4% rule, you'd have 65% more income in the passive account than you would in the active account. And that's before even taxes. Again, that's just an IRA. Isn't that crazy? No, he said 32% higher. 32% higher, excuse me. Bill Sharp said it'd be 65% higher. Either way. So that's look at that. It's a significant amount of difference right there. 1870 versus 3090. All because of the expense ratio. But everyone thinks, oh, but I'm going to be here. Everyone thinks they're going to be there. And inherently, not everyone can be here. It's impossible for everybody to be here. It's impossible. Someone has to be over here. Someone has to be there. So we know for a fact the average actively managed dollar will always be less than the average passively managed dollar. You're betting against the house if you go active management. It's just that simple. It's impossible for every single person to be here. So if you can't beat it, join it. You know you can't beat it. You can say, well, active management does other things. That's fine. I'm not talking about that. But what we are saying is if we're trying to get the biggest bang for our buck in our investments, which we should be, you just simply can't go active management. Oh, but Josh, Bill Danoff at Fidelity Contra Fund. Is he going to keep being Fidelity Contra Fund Bill Danoff? Legg Mason, Bill Miller, look at him. Did he continue to be the S&P 500? I talked about some investment course. Did Bill Miller, was the same Bill Miller in 2015 the same as in 2005? The answer was no, not even close. Not even close. Oh, Peter Lynch, Fidelity Magellan. What happened to Peter Lynch when he left Fidelity Magellan? The fund just became a closet index fund, essentially. I mean, just because a guy is outperformed doesn't mean you just don't know. But we do know for every Bill Danoff, there's all these people over here. So what, then everyone's going to jump into Bill Danoff at the Fidelity Contra Fund? What happens when he gets all that money thrown at him? You think he's still going to hit the ball out of the park? Let's keep going. Yeah. Oh. One of the principal challenges in calculating the average return of funds is also the need to eliminate survivor bias. That is to take into account not only the returns of funds that survived a given period, but also those that failed. Yeah, exactly. 100%. I have found that the data provided by Lipper to be quite reliable. Using its data for the last 2 decades, the surviving large cap core funds earned an average annual return of 7.86. But as shown, all funds in that category, including those that did not survive, only returned 6.5%, which is lower than the index fund. So not only do you have to factor in the cost, but many funds that start out get eliminated because of underperformance and lack of assets added to the fund. Dude, buy the index. I was talking to this guy today, he and his wife, and he had he's paying Schwab like 1% a year, and it's for what? And look, I don't hate Schwab. I don't hate active managers. I'm just like, what do you get for it? I mean, you can buy the index for nothing, basically, 4 basis points. So for every $100,000 invested, that's $1,000 back in your pocket. That's just a fact. Now, in this case, the guy spent like $50,000 a year. I think he's got $400,000 in his portfolio. All right, so he's spending $4,000 of his expenses, his $50,000 a year, $4,000 is going to management costs. That's about 8.5% of his total expenditures. If someone said, hey, I want you to give me 8.5% of your expenditures to manage your money, would you do it? You say, no, it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, if you were getting more for the fee, you would. It's literally impossible for everyone who has active management to outperform the benchmark. It's impossible. It can't happen. Anyway, so hope this helps. Love to hear your thoughts on that. I'm not slighting active managers. I'm not. There are things that they can do that passive funds don't in terms of providing more services than what you can get in terms of just putting your money at Vanguard. I grant you. If you're not getting those services, though, what's the point? All right, love to hear your thoughts. God bless.